snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hi guys, so today I'm going to be doing cover chat number 2. Thank you guys for your responses. You told me that you liked the first one and you liked the format of it, so that's good. Anyway, let's get started. So the book that I'm going to be doing this cover chat on is The Lies of Locke Lamora by Lynch. This book is a fantasy, but it's not like all focused on magic. It's very much a fantasy that is based on sort of thieves and characters who are really fun and witty and entertaining, as opposed to a magical fantasy world. I actually read this in October of last year, so not very long ago at all. I gave it 5 stars. It was amazing. I really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend you guys to give this a try if you've not read the series. Let's get started! So there are actually loads of different covers for this book. So the edition that I actually own is the Galanx 2007 UK paperback, and that is a very popular edition. It's the edition that most people seem to have, especially in the UK, and it's kind of divided in half. As you can see, there's a kind of golden bit at the top with the architecture that looks very rural and kind of like Venice or places like that. Lots of waterways running through the town, which relates to the story, and it's just really nice architecture, very good detail level. And then at the bottom there's a kind of green tinge across the bottom half, which divides it into 2, and the writing is on the bottom half. The writing is in bold, so it stands out quite a lot from the background, making it really interesting, and they've got a kind of script writing for the words the and of, which is very, very nice, like handwriting. Gives it more of a personal feeling, makes it more relatable, just more interesting to look at. And then the other words are all in a bold serif font, which is very clear and stands out straight away from the page and captures your attention. So we can see the silhouette of a figure who's actually perched kind of in a crouch position on top of a bollard, which is really interesting to see because obviously that kind of relates to skulking away and hiding. That's very much a part of this story, sneaking around and being really cunning. And then the colouring for the quotation by George R.R. Martin and the author's name is a very kind of pale green, matches with the shade of darker green that we see for the background. So altogether it just works really, really well. As a background and the text, it just all comes together into a really, really nice cover, and I would definitely say that it's worth buying. Very nice edition. The next one I'm going to talk about is the USA mass market paperback edition. So this is printed all over the world, and this was printed in 2007 by Bantam Spectra, and it has 736 pages. You'll notice on this cover that the text is actually very similar to the original. A lot of the covers for this book are very, very similar in the text that they use and the typography that they use. However, although it's very similar, it does have more flourishes on it. It's a little bit more fancy, or trying to be a little bit more fancy. And then there's also this kind of glow, which is behind Scott Lynch's name in the bottom corner, and that's a bit weird. It's kind of distracting because nothing else is really glowing quite like that, and the cutaway type doesn't really work because it's a little bit off-putting and it draws your eye down to it, but not in a great way. It's kind of more of a distraction than part of the cover as a whole. So the figure is kind of pondering the palace. He's looking away from us. He's in quite bright clothing, which is a bit unusual because obviously you would think that a thief wouldn't want to be noticed, but he's in quite bright clothing. He's sitting there pondering, staring off at the palace. The palace itself is kind of glimmering, glistening, huge, great, massive architecture, really impressive, very, very cool, but kind of sticks out a little bit from the houses down at the bottom. They kind of look very minuscule and out of proportion compared to that massive tower. But it is really pretty, and it reminds me of like the Disney Palace. So what's cooler than that? Nothing. And then there is a sunset going on behind, so maybe there's a little bit too much colours and distraction going on, but on the whole it's an okay cover. It's decent, it works, which is the main thing, but it's certainly not the best that it could be. The lettering used for the quotation by George R.R. Martin is quite blocky and doesn't really fit the cover very well, so I personally wouldn't have used that typography. I think that the title text is much, much better and fits a lot more with the fantasy genre. Would I buy it? Probably. It's okay, it's nothing particularly special, and it doesn't really grab my attention and make me want to pick it up, but it's an okay cover, so yeah. Next we have the US hardback, which was published originally in 2006. Again, by Bantam Spectra, and this one has 499 pages. So this one is quite different to all of the other covers because it consists of only two colours, and they are purple and a kind of very snowy white. And together you wouldn't think that they would work, but they just do. They're really nice. It's a really interesting colour combination, and I love that. I think it's very exciting and very different to a lot of the other stuff on the market, which is really cool. The lettering is kind of a cutout of the snowy colour, and it looks really effective. The lettering is very similar to the other two I just showed you, so no need to discuss that. There are all of these birds which are kind of flying around in the sky, making it look as if it's snowing, which is really interesting and really cool, kind of a big flock of them, really exciting. And then there's architecture around the sides and at the back, and you can't see very much of it because it's silhouetted, which is a little bit of a shame. I would have liked a little bit more detail, but it still looks really cool, and on the whole it's a really interesting cover. There aren't any figures on the cover, but it is a really well balanced design, and I would definitely pick it up myself. Next we have the English ebook edition, which was published in 2006 by Random House, and this one has 752 pages. So the lettering for this, it's beveled to make it look as if it's raised away from the page, which is nice. It's in this horrible reddish orangey colour, which really does not look like it fits with the design. It just stands out too blaringly. It detracts from the overall design just because of how obnoxious it is in the centre. The buildings themselves are really interesting. They kind of surround the central river, which is really nice, and they give this kind of closed-in, squashed city feeling, which is very much relating to the book. The river looks very serene, it gives a calming feeling, and then next to the river there's these kind of higgledy-piggledy steps, which is really lovely and gives the impression of being in a poorer district of the town or a bit of a darker district of the town, which again really does relate to the book. So if the horrible, obnoxious type was not red and blaring straight in your face, then I think that this would have been a really nice cover. Unfortunately, it is there, so I'm not sure I would buy this book just because of that typography, just standing out far too much and detracting so much from the actual beauty of the illustrations behind that. Next we have the English audiobook edition, which is by Tantor Media, and this was published in 2009, and obviously it's CDs, so no pages. So on this one the lettering has been changed to an embossed effect again. It's kind of beveled, it looks a little bit metallic, but it's been stretched and elongated to make it look more gothic and kind of match the gothic castle which it's in front of. I don't dislike this cover, but I don't think it works for this story. I feel like this cover looks as if it's a horror story or a sci-fi story just because of the metallic text and the elongation of the building, castle and the text, and the kind of face that's really creepy and I didn't notice at all to begin with, that's made out of the orange in the sky. Very strange. I'm not sure why there's just a figure staring out at you. It just seems creepy. It reminds me a bit of a godlike figure, so I'm not sure what it's doing there. It doesn't seem to fit in this cover, so very strange. Not really a great cover. Probably I would not pick this one up. It's okay, but I personally don't like horror stories, and I would probably look at this and think it was a horror story. Next we have the 50th anniversary of Galanx hardback edition, and this is obviously published by Galanx. It's their 50th anniversary edition series, and it was published in 2011. So this book is part of a series that Galanx released for their 50th anniversary, their fantasy series. There are 8 books in that series. As well as The Lies of Locke Lamora, there is The Name of the Wind, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and Hyperion, and a few others as well. So yeah, they're really cool. There's some really good sci-fi and fantasy reads that Galanx just thought were some of their best books, so
that shows you that this book is really good and you should pick it up if you haven't already.
The cover itself is really, really eye-catching. You can't fail to notice this if you go into a bookshop because it's a vibrant, bright yellow, and then it's clashing pink for the typography, which is really cool, really exciting. The typography is quite blocky serif type. It has a drop shadow around it, so it stands out even more, and it's really, really cool, the clashing colours. I think they've made a really good attempt at this cover, and they've made it so eye-catching that you can't avoid it. Then there's this zigzag that goes across the top, and there's a black line. Very, very eye-catching again. gives it more of a balance and harmony, and then it also focuses your eye on the banner that Galanx have across the top, which is really lovely. So on the whole, it's a very, very nicely balanced typography based cover, and I definitely think that if you know what the book is about already and you're a collector, then this is a really nice edition to have. Also, all of the Galanx 50th anniversary editions have a special introduction which has been written by another author about the book, so that's a really cool addition that they have within this collection. Would I buy this book? Quite probably. If I had the money, I definitely would. I think it's probably expensive, but it's really cool. Next, we have the English hardback, which is by Subterranean Press, and it was published in 2007 with 500 pages. So this cover is really, really beautiful. It's kind of like two different cities. So we have these red-roofed buildings, which are right at the foreground of the cover, at the very bottom. And they kind of remind me of Dubrovnik, which is a town in Croatia where I've been on holiday. I'll insert a photo. It looks just like that to me, and it reminds me of a really close-packed, really lovely, busy town. And then we have this kind of river or lake that is spread out with a beautiful glittering ripple across it. The light looks so beautiful on there. In the distance after that lake, we have this kind of brilliantly white lit up city which looks kind of like New York. It's kind of like an island just out there on its own. It's really pretty, but is it right for the story? I don't know, I'm not sure. But it's interesting, and the differences between the two is really interesting to look at. I'm not sure why they've done that, but I do like it, but I'm not sure it's right for this book. The typography itself, really, really beautiful. I do love the typography. Again, I'm not sure it's that fantastical, but it's a little bit more of a modern twist on fantasy, and it really looks beautiful. They've edited the S so that it's bigger on Lies, and that really complements the first L for Lies, and they match, which is really nice. And then there's another huge L which works for both Locke and Lamora, so the typography has just been really well considered and is very, very much more crafted and personalised for this edition than any of the other editions. Then also the colour scheme of the typography is a kind of gradient ice blue and white, which is really, really beautiful because again that reflects the kind of ripples of light upon the water, which you can see, so it all just works together as a really nice composition. On the whole, the cover is beautiful. Am I sure that it's right for the book? Not entirely, just because of that glowing city, but other than that I really like it, so I probably would pick this cover up. So next we've got the Italian hardback, and it looks like this. It was published by Nord in 2007 and it has 605 pages, so yeah, it's a really cool edition. It's very different to all of the other ones I've shown you because it's a very plain blue background, and then on front of that there's kind of a layer, and that is some archways, classical architecture, and that looks really, really cool, the white against the blue. And then perched upon the architecture and at the bottom there are all these crows, which is a very interesting addition to this cover. It kind of makes you think about what it could be about, but it's quite an ambiguous cover. It doesn't really give anything away. It doesn't really tell you that it's fantasy. So it's a bit strange. But again, from a collector's point of view, it's a really nice addition. I do like the cover. I think it's beautiful, but there is one major problem that I do have with the cover, and that is the positioning of Scott Lynch's name. It's positioned at the top of the archway, kind of in a rainbow position. I hate it because the shadowing underneath, which is on the archway, really doesn't give it consistency. It kind of looks like it is out of place because it shouldn't be there. It's been accidentally put there. So I really don't like that, but other than that I think it's a really, really nice addition, and just it works really well as a cover, but without that, if that was just moved to the bottom on that kind of white banister, that would be much better. But on the whole, it's a really nice addition. Again, I probably would only buy it if I was a collector and I was collecting the series in different editions, because you can't really tell what the story is about from this cover. Next we have the Spanish paperback cover, which is published by Alancia in 2008 with 736 pages. So this cover is kind of like a big lake. It takes up the majority of the cover, and then there is this church which is very classical as a focal point on the very centre, and then we have some buildings around that, red roofed buildings just surrounding it. The reflection of the buildings really looks pretty. I love it when they do reflections on books. I think it's such a beautiful art concept. And then on the water there's this little canoe with a few people in it, which is really nice. It does relate to something in the book, so I'm not going to tell you what, but it is in the book. It's a very simple design on the whole, with the lettering for the title being made to kind of ripple, have a little bit of a wiggle, so that it looks like it's on the water, kind of rippling along. And the layout of the white on top of the blue is again very nice because it stands out, but it's not obnoxious. And then Lynch's name is a paler blue on the darker blue of the sky, which is lovely. It's an okay cover, it's decent, it's not bad, but if I were to look at it and not know anything about the story, then I would definitely think that it was more of a historical fiction book or a history book, just because of the architecture and the canoe. There's no real reference to fantasy, so yeah. It's a decent cover though, so I might or might not buy it. If I read the blurb, I probably would. I don't know. Next we have the Polish paperback, which was published by Mag in 2007 with 542 pages. So this is a really different background and layout to all of the other covers. It's a completely white, stark background with typography at the top and then an image in the centre, kind of floating, not really a grounded image. And that image is of this really long, angular canoe type boat with two people in it, one who has a long pole to steer the boat presumably, and the other one who is sitting quite comfortably in the centre of the book. So the figures, they look quite static. They're not very believable, they look very static, sitting in their boat and standing in their boat, just because of the style that they're drawn in. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but they don't look like believable characters, and personally I don't really remember them being really Asian in look, I'm not sure. But it is an interesting, different way of approaching things. The ripples of the waves at the bottom of the boat are really, really beautiful. Again, I just told you guys how much I love rippling water, so it's beautiful. So the typeface is black with serifs, and it's kind of balanced quite well around the shape of the boat, and then at the very top there is Scott Lynch's name in a kind of dark red or brown, kind of matching the coat of the man sitting down, but actually it kind of looks a bit lost, a bit isolated. It's kind of up there on its own, away from everything else that's going on the cover, so it's a little bit too detached for my liking. I would have liked to see it a little bit more integrated into the design. The front of the boat has this kind of jagged blade bit that looks quite metallic. It looks very futuristic. I'm not sure that it works entirely for this kind of older world that Locke Lamora lives in, and you can't deny that it looks really cool and it captures your attention, and the angle of the boat is really dramatic, so it's a really nice cover. Again, I don't think it fits that well for the story, it could have been better, but I do like the cover, so I might well have picked it up if I saw it in a shop. Next we have the Finnish hardback, which is published by WSOY in 2007 with 541 pages. So this cover is absolutely beautiful. The town that you can see in the background is kind of this 2D cut-out paper layered effect, which really reminds me of one of those sort of concertina cards, like this. It really reminds me of that sort of technique, and it looks really cool on the blue gradient getting from darker to lighter with shadowing and lights lighting up all of the tiny little windows. It just looks beautiful, and again there's a large expanse of water which stretches out in front of the town, which again glittering, beautiful, really lovely. And the shape of the buildings in the city is all higgledy-piggledy, they're all piled on top of one another, all sticking out of one another, which is so beautiful. Then on the right hand side we've got this kind of brick wall which stands out, and then there's this bay or dock, and then there's a lone figure just standing there with a very elongated shadow which goes up the wall. So that looks really cool. It definitely draws your attention to that one person, and we want to know more about them and what they're doing there in the middle of the night. It's spooky, but it's not like horror. It's intriguing and it's mysterious, so it definitely links to the sort of thieving way. So it's a combination again of serif and script writing, which makes it really clear and easy to understand, and just very crisp and stands out well. On the whole, it's a really nice cover, and the blue colours are just really, really nice. The city itself just looks beautiful, so I would definitely buy this if I saw it. I think it's a very nice subtle link back to the book, and it just looks really beautiful on the whole. So
if you see a beautiful cover, you've got to pick it up. That's the way of life.
next we have the Bulgarian paperback edition, and I don't know if I'm going to pronounce who the publisher is very well, but I'm going to try. It is Punba. I'm sorry if that's really, really wrong. I don't know how you say it. But they published this book in 2008 with 640 pages in it. Again, this cover is very different to a lot of the other covers. It's a lot darker for a start, there's a lot of shadowing, and there's only half light where you do see areas of light, nothing very bright and vibrant or exciting. It's all very mysterious and shrouded. So there are two figures who stand in the centre of the composition, and that is, I assume, Locke, who is the skinnier one, and Jean, who is the bulkier one with the two axes. They are in the story and they are two of the main characters, so it makes sense for them to be there. They're definitely not how I imagined them. They have much more of a Middle Eastern feeling about them on this cover, it seems, but they're interesting. They don't really look believable to me because they're not real people and they're not kind of interesting caricatures of people, but they're there. And it's fairly simple. And then behind them there's all of this dramatic shadowing and all these very looming buildings casting great shadows all over the place. It's a very busy composition, but it's also quite a dull one. I don't find it that eye-catching or that appealing to me. It's a very formal kind of composition with the image in the centre and then type above and type below. And the typography is very script-based, so it's nice, but it's not, again, anything different or eye-catching. So on the whole, it's just meh. I don't really like it myself. I probably wouldn't pick it up, but it's okay. And finally, we have the Romanian hardback, which was published by Rayo and has 601 pages. So this one is a bit different again. When I look at this, the first thing that comes to mind is it a spy novel? Because you know, the silhouette just reminds me of a spy, and that's a bit weird because it's not really about spying, but I suppose spying is also kind of part of a thieving job, so maybe it relates in that way. But personally it just looks a little bit too high-tech spy, kind of more of a 21st century feeling to it to really be believable and relate to the story in the way that I imagined it, because I imagined it a lot further back in history than modern day spy films and things like that. There's also this kind of strange circular light which is behind. It reminds me again of a camera lens, so that's maybe why I'm thinking that it looks like a spy. Let me know what you think of all of these covers, because maybe I'm just crazy, I don't know. Then there's kind of this mismatch of serif text and then also a script text for the writing. The vibrant white really doesn't work. It's too white, it stands out too much, whereas the red writing, it fits in a lot better. If they had used perhaps an orange writing or a like dark rusky brown, then that probably would have fitted the scene a lot better. Behind there are actually photographs of real buildings. It looks like they're real buildings anyway, and it looks very much like they're kind of everyday modern buildings. The window frames that you can see in the very back of the centre, they just look like modern window frames with a white cross, and they don't really look authentically kind of old. So I don't really think that this cover fits. I think it's okay, but it just doesn't fit the story at all in my mind, which is a bit of a shame. It looks quite serene and peaceful, and it is again looking over a river, and then on the right hand side the lighting is quite bright, whereas on the left hand side it's quite dark, so I don't know if that is because of like man-made lighting ruining the photo or something, but that's what it looks like to me. So it doesn't look like a very good cover, and I wouldn't buy this. I don't think it's that good, so yeah. It just looks a bit too modern for the story. So those are all of the covers. I hope you guys liked them. Definitely let me know which ones you liked and which ones you would buy and which ones you wouldn't. And just tell me what you think of this series as a whole, if you have any suggestions for future books or future ideas that I can talk about. Please let me know, because I'm always looking for new ideas. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all very, very soon in my next video. Bye!